Tajani.
Good afternoon and welcome to the FinTech Hub session. So across the week, we will be hearing from FinTech hubs across the world, and today we are starting with the home country of Canada. So it's given me my pleasure to welcome our panel. So first of all, we have Christine.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christine Duhaime. I'm the founder of the Digital Finance Institute, and we're based in Vancouver, and it's my pleasure to be here today.
Jeff?
Hi, I'm Jeff Hindle, the Managing Director of FinTech at Mars in Toronto.
Pat?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Pat Chacos. I'm Chief of the OSC Launchpad, and I'm a little different than the rest of the panel in that we are a regulatory innovation hub.
And last but not least, Eric.
Hello, I'm Eric Lemieux, and I'm the head of the chairman of FinFusion in Montreal.
So the way that this session will work is that we will have a series of questions that I'll present to the panel, and then afterwards there'll be an opportunity for you to also ask some questions. So let's kick off. Christine, tell us a little bit about your hub and what things are making you excited about what's going on in Vancouver.
So we assist in Vancouver in the digital finance space, and Vancouver is really exciting because it has a very strong technology center, and a lot of companies in technology, Amazon being one of our big ones, Samsung Pay being another. So a lot of technology companies, they're developing technology, and that spins off into the financial services sector. So Vancouver is really growing in FinTech based on its technology base, so we're quite excited about where that's going to lead us as banks innovate more in technology and become technology firms.
And where do you see yourself in about 5 years?
I see Vancouver just becoming much more of a technology center and bringing into that a lot of AI and merging that with financial technology. So I think it's going to have all of the great elements to be a great FinTech center in the next 5 years.
Great. Jeff?
So Mars is one of the world's largest urban innovation centers. We have 1.5 million square feet in our facility for innovative startups of several different kinds. One of the 4 towers is finance and commerce, which I'm humbled to lead. It's quite an exciting group working in artificial intelligence, blockchain, payments of all different types. Toronto is where we're based, and Toronto is also an excellent place. It is the financial capital of Canada. All of the major banks have their head offices in Toronto, so they are just a short walk away. And New York is a quick flight, and London is a little bit of a longer flight, but nonetheless, they are close for us.
And where do you see yourselves in 5 years from now?
Our view for 5 years from now is we'd really like to create an ecosystem across Canada with our partners, 2 of whom are sitting here at the table, but across Canada that allows Canadian entrepreneurs to develop businesses here and stay here while reaching other markets. That's our goal. So in 5 years, I'd like us to really make that happen.
Great. And Pat, tell us a little bit about your hub.
Okay. We started OSC Launchpad last year as a pilot initiative, very similar to what you've heard in the FCA and Australia in terms of innovation hub, regulatory sandbox. So we're really here to engage with the FinTech community and help these businesses obviously get to market in a way that we can help as regulators. We've been hearing that there are barriers. We want to make sure that we're modernizing our regulation at the same time, keeping in step with digital innovation. So we're really here to help. We're here to help businesses, and we provide support to a number of these businesses that have come in. And it's not just, you're going to hear from 3 great centers, obviously, across Canada. We created this in Ontario last year, but we now have what's called the CSA Regulatory Sandbox, and we recognize that all the businesses that are coming in to see us want to operate Canada-wide and globally. So we've done that so we can help expedite a lot of these great businesses here in Canada and globally.
And Eric, in your hub?
Yeah, to understand Montreal as a FinTech hub, we have to look at 3 different parts. The first one is the finance part. So Montreal being a part of this country, we are very strong, and we have a very strong ecosystem in banking and regulation. We are very resilient. So that's important to understand what we're doing in our city. So that's a important part. The other part is the IT. Many companies are in international companies like Morgan Stanley, SocGen, BNP Paribas, they brought some technology in Montreal because we have very, very strong ecosystem in technology. And lastly, is the university. So Montreal is an important international university center. We have more students per capita after Boston. It's the place when you have more international students. So linking all of those, you become, you have a strong ecosystem where we're working with the university, especially with AI, where we're working with our local bank. We have 3 banks with the head offices in Montreal. And we're also working with the technology hubs and all the people in technology. So that's what we try to do in Montreal to increase and develop our FinTech ecosystem.
Great. So the use of collaboration and partnerships are really important when it comes to building a FinTech ecosystem. So Pat, one for you. How have you been able to use collaboration and partnerships across your region to further the goals of the hub? And what are the strengths that have come out over the last few years?
So I think, number one, what we're trying to do is raise awareness, because a lot of the fintechs, they've got great technologists on the team, but in terms of they're in the financial services space, and we have a very strong financial services here in Canada, and obviously there's regulation that's involved in that. But what we really want to do is think about, we've been hearing about some of the challenges. We want to make sure that we're hearing the challenges and we're removing some of those barriers. So we are doing that, as I said, across Canada with the other provincial securities regulators. So we have what's called the CSA Regulatory Sandbox. The other thing we're doing is actually globally. We've entered into agreements with Australia, the UK, and there are a few more in the pipelines, which I can't talk about today, but obviously something that we are recognizing. A lot of these technologies take a lot of resources, time, and energy. They want to be able to operate globally. The other thing that I think is important is that we're engaging with the FinTech community. We're out at the innovation hubs, we're talking to the community, and at the same time, they're learning from us, and we're hearing what's happening in the financial services sectors. Because I do think one of the challenges is in Canada is that a lot of these platforms want to be able to offer many financial services. We heard about banking, insurance, lending, mortgages, and securities, and how do I invest for the future? So how do you bring those things together? And I think that's why I think obviously events like this are important, but we need to be talking about how we can excel as a country on that front.
And Jeff, what do you think when it comes to collaboration and partnerships?
I think that collaboration is extremely important in this business. One of the main reasons that Mars was created over 10 years ago was to create an environment for entrepreneurs to have mentorship and fellowship amongst each other and learn from each other and share resources and experiences. Mars has been created, and we've expanded that across the Greater Toronto area, and we're working closely with a lot of different partners there. And our collaboration's expanding into the private sector. We have several corporate partners. We have venture capital partners who are not only investing but are also coaching. And we, many of our ventures are also participants in other regional innovation centers as well. We're not trying to hold on to them and keep them for ourselves. They are out getting the best that they can from all of these firms. Our goal really is rising tide raises all boats, and I think Mars has been successful as a catalyst, quite frankly, for the ecosystem, certainly in the Toronto area.
Christine, any thoughts on collaboration and partnerships?
Yeah, so I think what people don't realize about Canada is, we are a vast country, and so that's a barrier in some ways, just geographically, for the centers to kind of get together and work on things. But I think what has been really amazing is, at least in terms of the 3 cities, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, we have gotten together and worked on projects and try to advance FinTech for the whole country. And the reason why that's so important for all of us to work together is obviously we want to help our FinTech scale and make connections with international markets. So what we try to do is make the connections internationally and then work with our partners in Canada as well, so we can all help develop our ecosystem.
And so one thing that was key for the London ecosystem, which is where I'm from, in growing, was a mix of public, private, and government working together to actually allow the ecosystem to move forward. So if it's possible, it would be great to have some examples of where academia, government, and regulators have done things to support the ecosystem. Eric, would you like to take that one?
Yes. One of the things then the FI started is, I'm going to give an example with Desjardins. So Desjardins is a large credit union, and they put in place Desjardins Lab. And at the same time they put Desjardins Lab, they created the Cooperathon, which is an hackathon where the people have to cooperate instead. Being a cooperative, they use they use the word Cooperathon. So you remember I was telling you there's the banking industry, there's the IT industry, there's the university, and at the center, it's the startup and the FinTech. And FinFusion tried to bring all those people together to create more links between all those people, because they're coming from different realities. And it's a lot of work just to know each other and to know how to work with each other. Because being a FinTech, being a startup, it's not easy to work with a big bank or an FI. The time to make the decision, you're looking at your money one day after the other one with your FinTech, and the other time you're going to look at big process, going to take like 6 months or 1 year to make your decision when you're working in a big FI. So being able to put those people, understand the reality of each other, I think that's the essence of what we're trying to do with FinFusion.
I've got an example. So one of the things we actually did early on is we had been hearing that one of the key areas where startups are really looking for is funding, and how do you increase some of what was traditionally venture cap funding for Canadian startups. So one of the things we did when we started Launchpad was actually we brought in AngelList to Canada. And they obviously are a US and UK, very global platform that's really focused on venture capital. So we wanted to give an opportunity for Canadian startups to obviously put their businesses on a platform when they're looking to raise capital, but at the same time we wanted Canadians to be part of that equation. So we actually we did bring them in, and we lightened some of the barriers for a time period, because I think it's important that we're hearing what are the challenges for fintechs here in Canada and how we can help in terms of that. But at the same time, they're a registered dealer, what we would call a registered dealer here in Canada, and at the same time there are investor protections, because there are people looking at this. If you've gone through a creative destruction lab or an X36, you've obviously, there's a business, people have looked at it, entrepreneurs have been involved, so we wanted Canadians to be part of that equation and investing in those companies.
Jeff, your thoughts on this, as you have a hub that actually looks across other sectors as well as FinTech?
The relationship between the three pillars, you mean?
Yes.
Yes. Well, Mars was created, was actually born out of a partnership with the Ontario government. It was a decision to save a piece of architecture that was originally the Toronto General Hospital and turn it into an innovation center. In fact, where Mars is physically located is the same area where insulin was first applied. So we have 100 years of innovation experience, if you would, in the bricks in our building. And certainly it's hard to ignore our relationship with the University of Toronto, since we are at the intersection of University and College Avenues in Toronto. So we have a very close association with the University of Toronto and of course the other universities that are very nearby. But we're regularly invited to chat with our friends in the regulation groups to provide our insight, provide some feedback from our ventures. We certainly work very closely with the students. We even have some intern and fellowship courses where students actually come and work with us for a period of time. This is all part of the community. And as I said in the beginning, for Mars, it's about being a catalyst and being the rising tide that is raising all of these boats, whether you're part of the Mars family or next door.
Christine, any thoughts on the collaboration and the academia, government, and and regulators doing things together?
Yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about government because I think what you raised is important in the UK, where the government got behind fintech really early on and helped, develop it as an amazing fintech hub. And we were a little slow to get off the ground in Canada, to be honest with you. But now I think we've seen a much different perspective coming out of the federal government. Specifically, the Competition Bureau is about to release its study with respect to whether or not Canada's competitive and how that might be standing in the way of innovation, which I think we'll see changes coming from that in about a week or two. And again, we have some anti-money laundering laws that kind of stand in the way of innovation and onboarding quickly, and we're going to see some changes coming from that as well. So the federal government now is on track with being assistive for fintech, and I think we're going to see some changes coming down that will really help accelerate Canada as an ecosystem center.
And they've been very open to hearing from us and the ventures, which has been fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Aditha,
Yep.
if I would like to add something on collaboration.
Yeah.
For a fintech to be successful, you don't have the choice to look globally. So it's not just the collaboration between your local ecosystem, but you have and you must look at a broader ecosystem, your country, but also internationally. And I believe the more successful fintech companies will be the one who are able to build those links. And I hope then we are all working to help that. So it's very important to become a successful fintech.
So one of the other key things when it comes to developing a fintech ecosystem is about investment. So in London is still the capital of fintech investment in Europe. So it will be great to sort of get an understanding of the investment challenges here in Canada and in each of your respective cities, but also to understand how far you've come when it comes to the investment landscape in Canada. Who wants to start?
I can start, only because we've been hearing from a number of businesses, so maybe just a kind of a lens from hearing across. One of the things we're hearing, obviously you've heard from Eric and others, we've got a very strong financial system in the banks, but obviously there's 6 of them. So one of the things that I think we've been hearing is a number of these startups are saying, how do I partner with a lot of these larger financial institutions? Not just banks, could be insurance companies, mutual fund companies. So I do think that's something that we've been hearing in terms of how do we help enable the partnerships to happen. Certainly there have been some really good examples with the lending platforms with some of the larger banks, but how do you get your foot in the door? Because I think, from a startup's perspective, you may be spending a lot of time on that relationship, and that's a lot of time at a very urgent period of time in terms of, getting to market and needing, obviously, funding. So that's one of the things we're hearing in terms of challenges.
Christine?
We have a different, I don't know if it's a problem, but a different situation in Vancouver where it's a very wealthy city and people have an enormous amount of money and they support technology a lot and they're investing in a lot of startups. And if they don't, Silicon Valley is not very far away, so there's always a good source of funding. So I don't think funding is so much our issue here, but one of the things that Vancouver could benefit from is more connections to financial institutions to sell their products and get embedded with the banks in order to scale globally. So we don't really have so much of an investment issue in Vancouver, fortunately.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
Eric?
Yeah. It's very amazing when you look at all the fintechs, all the talented people who are working together, and in Mars or District 3 or different incubators. But we have money for seed and help them to start. But to make them grow, I think we have to. Our culture is not. It's not yet. The people, the investors, they are. They are.
Risk adverse.
Yeah. Thank you. So I'm talking maybe more from Montreal, and my colleague Jeff from Toronto will maybe say something different. But what I'm saying is more and more corporate investors, venture investors, they're becoming more and more aware, and they're saying then they will be able to invest more. But we are still at the beginning. In my mind, major number of our fintech, they are more the startup and at the seed level. The good news, they have all the support, they have the money. The next step is we'll be able to bring more capital to make them growth and make them growth internationally, just not locally.
Jeff?
Some of my favorite people are venture capitalists. I'll say. Canada's come a long way, there's no question. Seed capital is certainly much easier to find today than it has been in the past, but I think anybody who has been an entrepreneur, as I have, and who has been out looking for funding, there's never enough, it never comes quickly enough. It probably could actually rain money and it would still not be coming quickly enough. But it's certainly gotten better in Canada. I agree entirely with what Eric has said. You know, we've got a couple, we've been very lucky in Canada, and we've had a couple of unicorn firms take off, but certainly funds that are able to write the larger checks in Series B, Series C, and beyond that are supporting the acquisition of customers internationally is difficult, particularly when we're looking for that investment to support that firm staying in Canada. So we've got a little bit more work to do there. I think we've got a little bit more work to do even on the seed side. I'm going to encourage everybody who has the opportunity to invest to do so. I think there are tremendous opportunities. We're getting much better.
And with investment comes the challenges of finding the right talent to be in these companies. And so it would be great to allow the audience to understand a bit more about how the university sector is actually working with the fintech sector and what is happening in each of your respective cities. Eric, would you like to start? Yes.
I'm going to give you two examples. The first one is District 3, which is an incubator for startups. I was, in fact, last weekend I was at the Harvard Business School, and they were making a tour of the they call it high innovation, high for Harvard innovation. And it was sort of Harvard Business School, you know. And I was looking at Concordia, and they were sort of doing the same kind of thing. So I believe that we're in the right direction, you know, working and having those kind of incubator to help the students or help the alumni to develop their business. Okay. The other example I want to give is we have what we call Form FinTech. Form FinTech is an organization, and the goal of this organization is to help the startups to make the link with the regulator, with the investors, and to help them to grow. Because, you know, it's the difference as having an idea, a very good, you know, ideas, and make it happen and help them through the path of putting in place a company. So I think that this is two things important. I believe then and Form FinTech is really linked with the 4 big universities in Montreal. Right. So this is really linked with the universities. The other thing that I want to say is the AI. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning. I really believe it's going to have a huge impact on our industry. And I'm seeing a lot of link between those startups and the FinTech and the people in AI. So this is something else which is, I think, I see that very positive for the future.
Christine, Jeff?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that the more universities, you know, get into the space and offer courses, like UBC has now a blockchain course in law and in business, which I think are really important. And then their thought is, let's marry the two at some point. And I mean, it's great that they have people learning that and offering courses to students as the next phase. So I totally agree. The more we can get the universities involved in the space and educate the next generation, the stronger we'll be as a country and as an ecosystem.
Jeff?
I will echo that. I think it's a very exciting time to be a young entrepreneur. I think it's an incredibly exciting time to be a young technology entrepreneur. A lot of universities have programs, whether they're official classes on blockchain or whether they're even just groups and meetups. They are participating in the ecosystem. They are encouraging young people to strike out and try their own thing and be inventive and fail fast. But don't be afraid, and it is, I think, an extremely exciting time to be an entrepreneur. I will point out as well, though, entrepreneurial efforts are for all ages. At Mars, you know, many of our entrepreneurs are actually over 40. They are experienced people who've either coming out of universities or coming out of businesses, and they're beginning their second or their third career on their own. and that's also very exciting as well. So we're not just talking about two teenagers fighting over a pencil in a garage, as I once was. We're talking about some very experienced people using smarts to drive new business.
Well, there has been some research that the average age of an entrepreneur is actually 36. So the image of this teenage entrepreneur isn't actually as close to the truth as you may think. Pat, any views on talent and academia coming into the fintech ecosystem in Canada?
I agree with what everyone said. I guess from my perspective, I don't know that we have enough talent. I'm hearing there's obviously going to be huge amount of, first of all, demand in all of our cities. So, and I can say on a personal note, our initiative was a pilot initiative, and we're now permanent. I have to build my own team, so if anyone's interested in this space,
Hiring.
But that's what I've been hearing, is that obviously huge interest in Toronto, Montreal, and Montreal, Vancouver. So how do we bring the talent to Canada, I think will be a challenge for our governments.
Great. Well, talking about challenges, we're going to move on to that. So this is a question for all of you. So what are the biggest challenges that you are facing within your hub, and how do you think you're going to be able to overcome that, and what do you think will be a bit more tricky to overcome? Who wants to start? Eric?
Okay, I can jump in. You remember, I'm back with my model, and the financial industry, I think then one of the challenges is make the startup be able to work with the financial industry. I believe this is, and you know, when you're in a strong industry, sometimes you don't want to get disrupted by a fintech. So you understand then sometimes the alignment of both are not the same. But I think we start from big FI were not scared, but they didn't like that. After that, they've been looking, and now they see that as a tool to be able to innovate. And so they started to build relationship, but if they want to build real relationship, and not just, event with the startup, they still have some work to do. So this is, for me, this is one of the important challenge, is a link with the FI. The other one will be raising the money. It's still something that's going to be, it's always difficult. You see it, it's always difficult. But we don't have the same culture here in Canada than they have in San Francisco. So, but we're learning fast, and more people want to do that. Just an example, Blockstream is Montreal, has been founded in Montreal, but it's Montreal and San Francisco, because if you want to raise the money, it's sometimes very good also to have your your office in San Francisco. So
great. Christine, the challenges?
Yeah, I'd have to say the law, and it's because fintechs are financial services, and obviously for them to scale and provide services across Canada as the world's moving to mobile banking, everything's going to have to be online, and we have anti-money laundering laws that are quite onerous, that make it difficult to onboard a person easily or inexpensively compared to the rest of the world. And I understand that Canada wants to preserve its financial system. We want to be safe. But at the same time, we're at a competitive disadvantage because our laws are quite onerous. So I think the law is one of them. And then, your Bank of England has a fintech license. And what they've said, and you probably know, is that they don't have it's not zero fail. So they expect 15 to 20% of the new banks in the fintech license to fail. But if you were to say that to Canadian government, no way, we want no bank can fail in Canada. But I think if we just reverse the thought process and say, like you were saying, it's okay to fail. We learn from it. We get different companies that emerge that are probably greater and stronger and more innovative. But I think it's okay to fail and for us to embrace failure in financial services. But as I said, that's a cultural change that I think will come slowly in Canada.
Jeff?
I agree with everything that's been said so far. Certainly, more capital also requires more talent, and more talent requires more capital. So that can be a challenge. And regulatory change is another one. These are all three things that never happen fast enough, is what I will say. The thing that I'm looking for is the opportunity for Canadian entrepreneurs to really scale up outside of the Canadian environment. So be able to run their Canadian operations, delivering services into the United States, delivering services into Europe, into Asia, into Africa. I think that's what I'd really like to see. I don't want to see Canadian entrepreneurs, because of funding requirements, because of capital requirements, because of regulatory requirements, have to move head office from here to some other nation in order to advance their business. You know, we've seen that just far too often, and I'd really like to see Canada be home permanently for many of these firms.
And I think too, like Ethereum is such a great example where we got some digital currency law and off they went kind of the next day type of thing because they didn't because they weren't equipped to cope with that. But meanwhile, Switzerland now has Crypto Valley that actually should be Canadian. So if we can't reverse the clock, but I think what we can do is get a centralized person in the federal government that says we're open for innovation, come talk to us if you've got impediments and need to work things out and keep great companies here in FinTech.
Yeah. And last but not least, Pat, the challenges?
So I'm going to take a slightly different perspective. I hear the regulatory barriers a lot. What I would say to you is talk to who you need to talk to, whether it's your securities regulator or whatever regulator your business happens to be in, because what I'm hearing is something a little bit different. I'm seeing people interested in this space, wanting to make it work, whether it is the new cryptocurrency offerings or the latest AI intelligence. We know this trend is coming. We know this tidal wave's coming. These are new businesses. We want them in Canada, and I think regulators are listening. I think how to fix it, I personally, I know certainly the people I've been working with want to understand it better. We've heard the AML, the KYC issue. We actually had a RegHack-TO, which was the first hackathon by a regulator in Canada. And one of the things we heard is the real need for, let's say, a know your client or digitized identity. How do we make that happen in Canada? So what I've actually heard is part of the challenge, and maybe it kind of picks up where Christine was talking about, is the need for open data. We know in the UK they've obviously got PSD2, and there are other initiatives I think that you've seen from other governments. I think for that to happen in Canada, we'll need a collaboration with federal and provincial governments. But in terms of what we're hearing, that's important for fintechs and for fintech models to grow in Canada.
Okay, great. Well, that brings us to the end of the questions. So it'll be great to open it up to the floor for you as the audience to put your questions to the panelists. So the way that this will work is that we are going to use this little catch box. So when you have a question, if you just stand up, say your name and where you're from, and speak into this microphone. And once you've asked your question, then we'll move on to the next person. So if you can't catch, maybe don't ask a question. First of all, can we just say thank you to each of our panelists for the discussion? So warm round of applause, please. And now for some questions. So who's going to be brave to have the first question? Okay, great. Let's see if I can throw that far. Ooh. Oh!
Ready?
Great.
That's close. Eric Vandrich. My question is two parts. It seems to me, if you have customers, everything else falls in place. If you have an oligopoly in your financial services industry, 5 main banks and not much else, you don't have too many places to go to sell your services if it's to an incumbent. That might be a significant issue. And the gentleman was suggesting needed to go globally. In Canada, that usually means looking south in terms of larger market opportunities. Where I'm seated in Japan, I see UK fintechs coming and trying to present their wares to the Japanese financial services industry. And often what I get from the people around me in Japan is they're trying to solve a problem we don't have as customers, so they don't get too far. A lot of the models that we have in each of the markets is individual to that market and don't scale internationally or globally. The large banks deal with this, but the fintechs will also have that issue.
So your question, sir?
Where do we get the customers for a Canadian fintech when it doesn't necessarily scale to other markets. We can't say go global when the model that's built here does not necessarily fit somewhere else, or the model that we thought of here has already been developed and incubated in the UK. Where do we get our customers? Once we get the customers, everything else will fall in place in terms of the funding, in terms of the people standing up saying, hey, I'll do that too.
Great, thank you. We're going to take any other questions and then we'll answer them all together. So next question, this gentleman over there.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Again?
Oh, sorry about that.
Yep,
There we go. Yeah. So Mike Stardanovich with Northern Trust, and I'd like to know how would existing financial institutions generate a relationship with the hubs?
Great. And then we'll take this one from this gentleman here.
Hi, my name is Mo. I'm from Ottawa. And my question is specifically for the regulation side. I feel in the cryptocurrency space, some of the popularity from Switzerland has to do with self-regulatory organizations. And I wonder if that's maybe something that Canada could look into doing for new emerging markets, allowing us to set up SROs to maybe deal with some of the regulatory issues when it's still a very small market. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you all for your questions. So who wants to tackle the customers, the mighty question of obtaining customers? Who wants to take that question?
I can just maybe add an observation, but I don't know if it answers the question. But we did a FinTech conference in Nigeria in April. Because it's one of the largest English markets in the world, they need absolutely everything in FinTech, absolutely everything in AI, absolutely everything in blockchain. Like there isn't a thing they don't need. And we couldn't get one Canadian company to get on a plane and sold out conference in English to speak, to take that opportunity, to take advantage of it. Incredible as that sounds, and I think in Canada we are risk adverse. Even in the simplest thing as there's a foreign market with customers. For me, I should get on a plane even if it costs me $1,000 and speak to a different country about what services I can offer. So I think in Canada we do have that issue of what is the market in a place like Nigeria. It's pretty easy to figure out because it's everything. But what do they need and what can I sell? And am I going to get on the plane and does it make sense? And even if it doesn't make sense the first time, get on the plane really. So yeah, that's not an answer to your question, but that's an observation that in Canada we need to just be more risk-taking and go sell ourselves.
Jeff, would you like to take this question about customer acquisition?
Certainly. There's no question that there's some fundamental structural problems with the Canadian market. Christine mentioned it a little bit before. We're sort of spread out geographically, so reaching them, servicing them can be challenging. There's no question that the concentration of our big FIs are also challenging. I guess when we're talking about FinTech as it relates to the acquisition of customers in Canada, I think it depends on what it is that we're talking about. If you're talking about firms that are capable of doing online lending, for instance, there are a few who have gone direct to consumer and again, seem to be doing well in direct competition with the banks. I mean, the financial institutions in Canada has great or not great as they may be, depending on your perspective. The reality is that there are certain segments of the business that they're just not efficient and effective at servicing. And so we're seeing a number of smaller technology companies that are able to step in and service those markets directly. There is a challenge, and there's no question about that. If you have a product or a service that needs a partner that is an FI in order for you to acquire enough customers, that's a real challenge here in Canada. There are 5. They are competitive, so quite often when you sign something with one, you can't necessarily sign it with all 5, that's for sure. Often what we've seen is that there is a relationship with 1 or maybe 2 of the Canadian FIs, but then those FinTechs are heading to another market. You mentioned that other market being heading south. I think that historically that has been the avenue of least friction. I'm not sure that it's going to continue doing that. The United States is a very interesting and exciting market. The reality is you can go into one state, you can go into one city and have the equivalent of Canada, and your marketing costs, your acquisition costs, your service delivery costs can go way down. But our regional innovation centers are working hard for Canadian firms to give them the opportunity to have soft landing zones in other countries to take their services around the world where they can. The last part of your question was, that common factor. I will say that I have had the honor of working for one of the large Canadian banks that is quite international, and I will say to you this: the world is more the same than it is different. There are some pieces around regulation, around controls that you sometimes need to pursue or add. But there's a lot of countries out there, for instance, that are greenfield for mobile technologies. There are a lot of countries out there that are just now coming into the digital age and don't have an incumbent infrastructure. And those represent some great opportunities. And we have some fintech firms that are, quite frankly, not necessarily focused on Canada, but in fact focused on markets elsewhere, but are coming from Canada because of the strong Canadian brand, the technology that's here, and the education and talent that's here.
Great. Well, I hope that answers your question, sir. So the next question was really about the relationships between the regulator and how to sort of build on those. So who wants to take that?
Are we talking about that question or the one over here?
The one over here.
Okay, I thought it was innovation hubs.
Yeah, how do existing financial institutions generate a relationship with the hubs themselves?
Right. So, and I don't know if you're asking about the regulatory hub, but certainly ours is open to incumbents and startups. Yes, so just reach out to our team, but I think you were asking more from a business perspective, so. Did you want to?
I want to answer both questions. First of all, no, I mean, it's related both. There's the when you're looking at a customer, there's the B2C and the B2B. And if we look at the B2C, it's very, very expensive to scale up. And you have to fill a gap where the FI are not there. For example, the alternative lender. The reason why here they have different alternative lenders companies, it's because with the regulation and everything, the money was not available anymore through regular banks. So that's grow a market of alternative lender. And but there's not a lot of space like that. The other thing is there's the P2B. When you create a product, you bring something, and I'm going to say artificial intelligence, Internet of Things. When you bring some knowledge for big insurance company, will be able to provide new kind of insurance linked with what's happening in your house, what's happening in your car. So if I'm a large insurance company, I'm interested to know and to be in link with those startups who can bring something that I will be able to use, because it's very hard to innovate or have disruptive innovation inside of your big regular company. So and I believe that this kind of ideas are good not just for Canada, they are good also to export. The other thing also is Montreal. I will talk with Montreal because of the link with Europe. Many companies are coming to Montreal as the first place to be able to expand in US and in Canada. So that's maybe something a little bit different. You were saying about South, of course, mainly all the exportation are South, but that's something different. The other thing also is in US, there are 6,000 banks. It's a different model. Credit union, there's many thousand of credit union. If you are able to bring a product or something as a service, but you have to answer a real problem, you have to solve a problem. If you have a solution with no problem, it's going to be hard to raise money and it's going to be hard to sell it. I agree with you. For the week to make the innovation, make the link with the FI, they have to learn from each other, and and it's going to take a while, in my mind. And even if we see some collaboration in Innovation Lab, for me it's just the first step. Because look at what's happening in those Innovation Lab. There's not a lot of products who's going to go in the banks with the legacy system and everything. So it's going to take a while, in my mind. So.
And to also add to that, I think that it's important to realize that you can have an innovation program and you can staff it, but it needs to move beyond the innovation program into bits of the core business, and that is when real business starts, because it has to move past the POC and the pilot. So the organizations that ring fence money in order to have pilots, that is great. That's a great first step. But the next step is to actually tackle real business problems that impact the business as a whole. And yes, it is hard, especially in large organizations. And we've found the same challenges in London. But that stuff will take time.
Yeah.
To Mo's...
Just want to add another thing. Just the fact then we have the FinTech, then everybody are talking about FinTech. I really believe that it's an awareness and it's very positive. So I think that we're moving in the right direction. Last week I was in the forum in Montreal. We have almost 2,000 people who were talking about FinTech. So, and when we started the conference 5 years ago, there were 200 people. Now almost 2,000 after 5 years. So the awareness it's the first step to be able to build something. And we don't have the choice to build it because it's our future. Look at our customers. The way they're going to buy their clothes, the way they're going to buy their car, the way is changing. So the way they're going to do business with us, the banking industry, will change also. And I'm more from the banking industry than the FinTech industry. So that's why I'm talking like that to you.
So,
Can I add one point?
yes, we definitely need to get to Mo's question.
Do it in 30 seconds.
Very fast.
Okay. In the Mars environment, we have a program for corporate partners. It's just as important to us as our ventures. My team is responsible for ventures, so they are most important to us. But there is another team that has relationships with the corporates. And quite frankly, what we do is a similar type of set of services that we provide for ventures. There's coaching, there's mentorship. What we do is we try to understand your organization's wants, needs, and desires, and match those with the entrepreneurs who are coming, who will be able to work with you and communicate with you, and meet your actual needs and requirement, and coach them on how to best work with you as well. So we have a whole program centered around this.
So to Mo's question about cryptocurrencies and the crypto landscape, who wants to sort of tackle that question? Mo, do you mind reminding us of your question again?
SRO. I can take
Those
that.
can maybe, thank you. I was more asking about SROs, self-regulatory organizations, as maybe a way to allow fintechs to accelerate their innovations faster than necessarily working with large regulatory institutions that are run by the government.
Great. So, Pat, I think that is exclusively for you.
But you're asking specifically on cryptocurrency offerings, right?
Not necessarily on cryptocurrency offerings,
Okay.
but that's a good example.
Okay. So I think we're early days for cryptocurrency offerings. Just to give everybody a bit of context, we're starting to see a number of what are called initial coin and token offerings. It's a way of capital raising in many instances for a lot of these fintechs. So in terms of SROs in Canada, we have two. One is the investment dealers and the mutual fund dealers, very well established industries. I'd say it's early days for that. But I gotta be honest with you, this is an area that fascinates me. I'm open to that type of discussion to hear what the thoughts are and how we might make it better.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your questions. And that now brings us to the end of our session. So if you'd like to give all the panelists another warm round of applause. So next, it's time for a bit of a break. But before that break, I'd like to just let you know what the next session will be. So the next session in this room will be about identity, and it will take place here at 3:30. And something that the InnoTribe team have decided to do, which is really important across the week, is to run a campaign to help those that are not so advantaged as we are. So there have been a number of natural disasters around the world, and one of them has been the Mexican earthquake. So when you do go and get your coffee outside, we have a donation box which you can actually add your change into, and Swift are going to match all donations raised from the coffee. So thank you very much and have a good conference.